Lee, and welcome to Corny Tips, the Law and the Market. Okay, our topic for tonight's discussion is aggravating circumstance under the Revised Penal Code. This is a three-part episode kasi there are 21 aggravating circumstance na kailangan natin i-discuss para mas maintindihan nyo. So sa mga students ko, just sit back, relax, and enjoy as you listen and understand the discussion in aggravating circumstances. So here we go. What is an aggravating circumstance? By definition, those circumstances which raise the penalty for a crime without exceeding the maximum applicable to that crime. So the basis of this is the greater perversity of the offense and the offender as shown by the motivating power behind the act, the place where the act was committed, the means and ways used, the time, the personal circumstance of the offender, and the personal circumstance of the victim. So there are how many kinds? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. There are 4 kinds. Siyempre, yung generic, this is generally applicable to all crimes. While in specific, this applies only to specific crimes like ignominy for chastity crimes and treachery for personal crimes. So the next kind is qualifying. Ano ba to? A qualifying is those that change the nature of the crime, like evident premeditation, treachery. If you are familiar with the crime of murder, the qualifying circumstances include treachery and evident premeditation. So, pag meron nun, the crime of homicide becomes murder. And lastly, the inherent aggravating circumstance. It necessarily accompanies the commission of the crime. It is an element of the crime committed. Like in estafa, evident premeditation is part of committing estafa. So, ano ang difference ng isang qualifying aggravating circumstance sa isang generic aggravating circumstance? Siyempre, pag generic, it can be offset by a mitigating circumstance. Pero pag qualifying siya, hindi siya pwedeng i-offset ng isang mitigating circumstance. And pag qualifying siya, guys, pag qualifying siya, it changes the crime. It upgrades the crime, like homicide to murder. It gives the proper exclusive name, place the authors thereof in such a situation as to deserve no other penalty than that specifically provided for by law. While in generic circumstance, it only increases the penalty to the maximum without exceeding the limit prescribed by law. A qualifying circumstance also must be alleged in the information. However, in a generic aggravating circumstance, it need not be alleged and may be proved over the objection of the defense. Pero, to be safe, the prosecutor should always allege all and every aggravating circumstances. Otherwise, pag hindi yan nakita ni judge at hindi rin niya na-discuss sa trial, hindi po siya magiging, ang penalty niyan once may conviction is always on the medium. Okay? So, yun yung preliminaries natin. So, we know aggravating circumstances are not presumed and must be proved as fully as the crime itself in order to increase the penalty. So, the first aggravating circumstance is that advantage be taken by the offender because of his public position. A public officer. Okay? The offender is ang requisites nito is syempre, kaya may public position, di ba? So the offender here is a public officer, and the commission of the crime would not have been possible without the powers resources, and influence of the office he holds. For example, malversation of public funds. Eh, syempre, ikaw yung nandyan sa posisyon, kailangan public officers are an aggravating circumstance. So, when you take advantage of a public position, even if there are mitigating circumstances, but here, when you take a public position, when you are a public officer and you commit a crime, taking into consideration your public position, using it in the commission of the crime, kahit may mitigating circumstance, guys, hindi siya ma-reduce or hindi siya ma-equalize. Because under Section 23 of RA 7659, the penalty to be imposed shall be in its maximum regardless of mitigating circumstance. So that is in accordance with law. Okay? Next. Insult to authority. Ano ba to? The crime be committed in contempt of or with insult to the public authorities. So, ano ba to, guys? Insult. Siyempre, kadalasan ito yung ginagawa ng mga siraulo na may atraso kay mayor or sa mga public official. Take note, requisites nito. The offender knows that the public authority is present, like governor, mayor, si presidente, and the public authority is engaged in the exercise of his functions, and the public authority is not the victim of the crime. The public authority is present did not prevent the criminal act. Ito yung sinasabing walang gustong magpakitang gilas. Gusto ipakita kay mayor or kay barangay kapitan na mga matapang sila. So, sa harap mismo ng kapitan, binugbog niya yung kasama niya. Example nito is, Juan and Pedro are quarreling and the municipal mayor, upon passing by, attempts to stop them. Notwithstanding the intervention in the presence of the mayor, Juan and Pedro continue to quarrel until Juan succeeds in killing Pedro. Ito, guys, yung mga matapang. Okay? So, clear yan. Pero bihira din yan mangyari, guys, kasi nowadays, pag andyan si kapitan, andyan si mayor, yung mga matatapang na yun, magiging mapait. So, take note that the personal authority also is one who is directly vested with jurisdiction and has the power to govern and execute the laws. Take note, guys, the personal authority, hindi yung per agent of personal authority, wherein usually yung mga pulis, kahit may pulis, matapang, nagbugbugan sa harap ng pulis, hindi po yan yung aggravating circumstance na minimension dito. Kailangan personal authority yung makasaksi sa kalokohan na ginagawa ng isang criminal or isang akusado. Okay? Next, that the act be committed, 1, with insult or in disregard of the respect due to the offended party on account of his rank, age, sex, or that it be committed in the dwelling of the offended party if the latter has not given provocation. Okay. Discuss muna natin tong first part. So, rank refers to a high social position or standing. Yung mga taong alta sa syudad, by which determine one's pay and emoluments in any scale or comparison within a position. So, age and sex refers to the female sex and not to the male sex. So, eto, guys, kadalasan, hindi ito ginagamit kadalasan. Okay? Ang parating ginagamit dito is yung second part, which is that the crime be committed in the dwelling of the offended party if the latter has not given provocation. Dwelling. What is dwelling? A dwelling must be a building or structure exclusively used for rest and comfort. It may be temporary, as in the case of guests in the house or bed spacers, or it is basis for this is the sanctity of privacy, but the law accords to human abode. Dwelling, take note dwelling includes dependencies of the house, the foot of the staircase, and the enclosure under the house. So, kasama yung basement. So, dependencies, ibig sabihin, kasama yung nasa labas. Nasa labas siya ng pintuan, pero parang balkonahe. So, ano yung element nito? That the crime occurred in the dwelling of the victim and there is no provocation on the part of the victim. Otherwise, pag may provocation, hindi, although there is a crime, but hindi pwedeng i-recognize yung aggravating circumstance ng dwelling sa crime na yan. Okay? So, madali lang naman siya intindihin and yun lang, basic lang natin i-discuss. Next. Clear yun. That the act be committed with abuse of confidence or obvious ungratefulness. Usually, ito yung mga pinapatira mo sa bahay. Or, yung mga may utang na loob sa'yo, technically, yung katulong nyo sa bahay, ay ninakawan ka. Okay? In abuse of confidence, it is inherent in malversation, qualified theft, estafa by conversion, misappropriation, and qualified seduction. Okay. Malversation, yung pera sa tindahan, itinakas. Ginamit sa ibang pagkakakitaan. Qualified theft, yung katulong mo, tumakbo na, kinuha yung pera mo. Estafa, same din. Katulong din yung guilty dito. And misappropriation, katiwala sa bahay. And ito yung pinakamasama, qualified seduction. Yung katulong mo, sinidus yung asawa or anak mo na minor de edad. So, that's it. Okay. Next. Clear yun na? Okay. Next is that the crime be committed in the palace of the chief executive or in his presence or when public authorities are engaged in the discharge of their duties in a place dedicated to religious worship. So, ano yung sinasabing ito, guys? Dali lang That the crime be committed in the palace of the chief executive. Saan to? Sa Malacanang. Sa Malacanang. Pag nangyari yung krimen sa Malacanang, automatic aggravating circumstance ang lahat ng kagaguhan na nangyari doon. Next is, when public authorities are engaged in the discharge of their duties. So, yon, public authorities engaged in, usually in the public plaza, may kasiyahan, or during the meeting, or in a place dedicated to religious worship. Simbahan, nangyari yung pagnanakaw. Simbahan, nangyari yung patayan. So, it is aggravating pag mga nangyari yung krimen doon. Okay? So, madali lang naman. This refers to the place of kung sa the place of the commission of the crime. Usually, in a public place where public officers are working. So, city mayor's office, vice mayor's office, opisina ni kapitan. Okay? So, clear. Or simbahan. Okay. Now, number 6. Ano to? Okay. Okay. Number 6. Should the crime be committed in nighttime, in an inhabited place, or by a van? Ito maganda. Discuss natin isa-isa. Kasi hindi lahat ng krimen na nangyari during nighttime ay what? Ay ginagamit ang aggravating circumstance na ito. Okay. Sa nighttime, uninhabited place or by a band, kailangan may mga requirement. First is, it facilitated the commission of the crime. Pangalawa, it is especially sought for by the offender to ensure that the commission of the crime or for the purpose of impunity, or C, when the offender took the advantage thereof for the purpose of impunity, and the commission of crime must have begun and accomplished at nighttime. So, kailangan during night, hindi, kung riding in tandem ang nangyari, hinintay nila gumabi, nighttime. Pero kung pag nanakaw, akyat bahay, hinintay yung gabi para tulog na yung mga tao sa loob, akyat bahay, nighttime, appreciated yan. Uninhabited place, pinatay sa lugar na walang katao-tao. Or, habang dumadaan ka, inambush kayo, by a band. So, by a band is through 3 male factors, armed male factors. So, kailangan dito, these 3 facilitated the commission of the crime. Without nighttime, daytime, syempre, hindi yun magagawa. So, kailan ba yung nighttime? Nighttime begins at the end of dusk and the ending of dawn. From sunset to sunrise. Dali lang naman ibig sabihin. So, when the place of the crime is illuminated by light, nighttime is not aggravating. So, pag mailaw, kahit gabi, at nakilala yung salarin, hindi po yun, ano yan? Hindi po yun considered as an aggravating circumstance. Okay? An uninhabited place is defined as one where there are no houses at all, a place at considerable distance from town, or where the houses are scattered at a great distance from each other. Kadalasan nangyayari to sa probinsya. Siyempre, sa Metro Manila or other urban areas like Iloilo City, Legazpi City, hindi po to uninhabited place. Pero kung nasa bundok ka, nasa malayong barangay ka, at yung kapitbahay mo 100 meters away or 500 meters away, at nagtatawagan kayo, nagsisigawan kayo, para lang imbitahin kumain. So, that is considered as an inhabited place. Okay. So, by a band is whenever more than 3 armed male factors shall have acted together in the commission of the offense. Ibig sabihin, marami sila at may armas. Hindi necessarily, guys, na baril ang armas nila. Kadalasan, panaksak or panghataw. Okay? Hindi nga by a band. So, yun. Must be 4 or more armed men. And for the last part, next is that the crime be committed on the occasion of conflagration, shipwreck, earthquake, epidemic, or other calamity or misfortune. Ano ba to? Okay. Right now, we are in a pandemic. So, epidemic, considered as epidemic. So, syempre, anong requisites nito? The offender took advantage of the state of confusion or chaotic condition from such misfortune. Sir, eto po yung tanong. Dahil po ba may pandemic, may COVID-19, considered as lahat ng krimen po na nangyari, may aggravating circumstance po. Hindi lahat. Take note, in the second requisite, it must be that the offender took advantage of the state of confusion or chaotic condition from such misfortune. First few days, nagkakaubusan, ng mga grocery kasi magla-lockdown yung Manila, yun pwede yun. Or during the execution of lockdown sa mga local places na nagkaroon ng price gap or nagkakaubusan ng bigas sa merkado, yun, pwede yun. So, the offender took advantage of the state of confusion or chaotic condition from such misfortune. Otherwise, hindi po. So, conflagration, ano ba yung conflagration? Conflagration is sunog. May nasusunog. At during sa nasusunog na bahay, ninanakawan mo or pinapatay mo yung isang tao na malapit doon sa nasunugan. Or yung nasunugan mismo. Shipwreck is what? Ito yung lumubog na barko. So, if you will remember guys, yung mga habang tumatawid ka pag imaras, may na lumubog na barko doon. So, ang ginawa mo, gusto mong patayin yung kapitbahay mo na kasama mo tumatawid sa Gimaras, and nang lumubog yung barko ay yung bangka, dahil hindi siya marunong lumangoy, siya yung hinawakan mo. Kasi ikaw marunong ka lumangoy at dinunod mo siya. So para hindi mahalata, kunyari nalulunod kayong dalawa, pero katunayan ay pinapatay mo na siya. So this is an aggravating circumstance in times of shipwreck. So that's it for now. So watch out for the second part of our topic. Thank you and God bless.